The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under the apartment door while Maya Chen was already at work. Her daughter Lily found it first, the bold red letters spelling final notice making the 8-year-old's hand shake as she carefully placed it on the kitchen counter where her mother would see it. 30 days. They had 30 days to vacate the 2-bedroom apartment that had been their home for 6 years, ever since Maya's husband Daniel had walked out, leaving behind nothing but unpaid bills and a daughter who still asked when Daddy was coming back. Maya was 34 years old, though the exhaustion carved into her features made her look closer to 40. Her nursing scrubs were faded from too many washes, her sneakers held together with super glue because new shoes meant choosing between footwear and Lily's school lunch account. She worked the overnight shift at Mercy General Hospital, 3 12-hour nights each week, then picked up day shifts in urgent care clinic whenever they'd let her. The math never worked. It hadn't worked in 3 years, not since the medical bills from her mother's final illness had swallowed what little savings they'd managed to build. The apartment in Sacramento's Midtown district had once been affordable, barely. Now the landlord wanted to renovate, convert the building into luxury units for the tech workers flooding the city. Maya's rent-controlled lease was an obstacle to his vision of exposed brick and stainless steel appliances. The eviction was technically legal, a building-wide termination of tenancies for substantial renovation. The lawyer she'd consulted for 30 minutes of free advice had been sympathetic but clear. She had no legal recourse, only 30 days to find somewhere else to live in a city where average rent had doubled in 5 years. That evening, after her shift ended at 7 in the morning, Maya sat at their scratched Formica table, the eviction notice in one hand and a lukewarm cup of instant coffee in the other. Lily was still asleep in the bedroom they shared, curled around the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. The rabbit's fur was matted and one ear hung by a thread, but Lily refused to sleep without it. Just like she refused to give up hope that their situation would somehow improve, that the universe would stop punishing them for crimes Maya couldn't identify. The bills spread across the table told their familiar story. Rent due in 5 days, $1,200 they didn't have. The electricity company's disconnect warning, 90 days overdue. The hospital wanted $400 for Lily's emergency room visit last month when she'd fallen at school and needed stitches. The car insurance had already lapsed. Maya drove to work anyway because the bus schedule didn't accommodate her overnight shifts, praying each trip that she wouldn't get pulled over or hit something. She was calculating which bill to pay first when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Maya almost didn't answer, assuming it was another debt collector who'd somehow gotten her cell. But something made her swipe to accept. Is this Maya Chen? A woman's voice, professional but not unkind. This is Catherine Morrison from Morrison & Associates law firm in Truckee. I'm calling regarding the estate of Margaret Chen. Maya's heart stopped. Aunt Margaret, her father's older sister, the one who'd sent birthday cards with $20 bills tucked inside until Maya turned 18, then gradually lost touch as life pulled them in different directions. Maya had heard through a cousin that Margaret had passed away 6 months ago, but there'd been no funeral, no announcement, just whispered family gossip that Maya had been too overwhelmed to pursue. I'm sorry for your loss, Catherine continued. I know this call is unexpected. Ms. Chun left very specific instructions that I wait 6 months after her passing before contacting you. She wanted to ensure certain family members had time to, as she put it, show their true colors before you were informed of your inheritance. Inheritance. The word felt foreign, impossible. Maya gripped the phone tighter. I don't understand. Margaret and I hadn't spoken in years. We weren't close. According to her will, you were the only family member who checked on her when she was ill, even though you were struggling yourself. You sent cards, made phone calls, offered help even when you had nothing to give. Ms. Chun found that significant. Papers rustled on the other end. She's left you her property in the Sierra Nevada mountains, near Donner Summit. A cabin on 43 acres, completely paid off. Maya's mind spun. A cabin. 43 acres. What's the catch? Catherine's slight pause told Maya her suspicion was warranted. The property requires significant work. Ms. Chun lived there alone for the last 20 years of her life, and she wasn't able to maintain everything in her final years. The cabin itself is structurally sound, but it's rustic. No central heating, well water, fairly isolated. The property taxes are approximately $3,800 annually, which have been prepaid for this year. Beyond that, the land is yours free and clear. Free and clear. Maya looked around their cramped apartment, at the eviction notice, at the impossible math of bills that would never balance. A cabin in the mountains, even a rustic one, was more than they had now. It was somewhere to go. "There's one more thing," Catherine added. "I have a letter Miss Chen left for you. She insisted I read it to you before you made any decisions." Maya heard more papers shuffling. Then Catherine's voice softened as she began to read. "Dear Maya, if you're hearing this, I'm gone, and I hope I've left you something worth fighting for. The family will tell you this property is worthless. Your Uncle David already tried to buy it from me for $10,000, which should tell you how little they think of it and how much they actually value it. Don't let them convince you it's a burden. That land has been in our family since 1952, and it holds more than trees and rocks. I watched you struggle after Daniel left. I saw you working yourself to exhaustion, trying to give Lily a good life. You reminded me of myself at your age, stubborn and proud, and refusing to ask for help even when you desperately needed it. I couldn't help you then without enabling the very family members who'd spent years taking advantage of my isolation. But I can help you now. The cabin isn't fancy. You'll have to work for what it gives you. But it's yours, and it's paid for. And sometimes that's enough to build from. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Trust yourself, Maya. You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for. With love from someone who understood, Margaret." Maya's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. Catherine waited patiently before continuing. "I can email you the paperwork. The transfer is straightforward, no liens, no debts attached to the property. All you need to do is sign the deed transfer and the cabin is legally yours." "How soon?" Maya heard herself ask. "I can have documents ready by tomorrow. If you sign electronically, the transfer could be complete within 48 hours. Maya looked at the eviction notice. 30 days. Send me everything. After the call ended, Maya sat in the pre-dawn silence, her coffee long since cold, her mind racing through impossible calculations. A cabin 4 hours away in the mountains. No job prospects in tiny mountain towns. Lily would have to change schools in the middle of 3rd grade. They'd be leaving behind Maya's support system, the nurses she worked with who'd become her only friends, the pediatrician who'd treated Lily since birth. But they'd also be leaving behind debt collectors and eviction notices and the grinding poverty that had slowly crushed every dream Maya once had. A cabin, rustic or not, was a foundation. It was theirs. That had to count for something. Lily woke an hour later, padding into the kitchen in her faded princess pajamas, the stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. "Mama, why are you still awake?" Maya pulled her daughter into her lap, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and sleepy warmth. "Baby, how would you feel about an adventure?" Lily's eyes lit up with a resilient optimism that had somehow survived their circumstances. "What kind of adventure?" "We might be moving to the mountains. To a cabin that belonged to your great-aunt Margaret. The one who sent birthday cards?" "That's right." Lily processed this with the seriousness of a child who'd learned too young that change usually meant loss. "Will I have to leave my friends?" "Yes, baby. But you'll make new ones." "Will we have our own rooms?" Maya hedged. "I'm not sure yet. The cabin might be small." "Smaller than this?" Lily looked around their cramped apartment with its peeling linoleum and water-stained ceiling. "Maybe about the same." Lily was quiet for a moment, her small fingers twisting the rabbit's damaged ear. "Is it because we have to leave here anyway? Because of the notice?" Maya's heart cracked. 8 years old and already understanding too much about financial precarity. "Yes, honey, we have to leave. But this way, we're choosing where we go instead of scrambling to find anywhere that will take us." "Then it's a good adventure," Lily decided with the fierce determination she'd inherited from her mother. "When do we go?" The paperwork arrived by email an hour later. Maya read every word 3 times, searching for hidden clauses or obligations that would make this impossible gift into another burden. But Catherine had been thorough and honest. The property was exactly what she described. 43 acres of mountain forest surrounding a 900-square-foot cabin built in 1952, one bedroom, one bathroom, a wood-burning stove for heat, well water that had tested clean as recently as last year. The tax assessment valued the property at $85,000, mostly for the land since the cabin was listed as minimal improvement value. In Sacramento's housing market, that was laughably low. Here, looking at the property photos Catherine had attached showing weathered cedar siding and a moss-covered roof, Maya could see why the family had dismissed it. But weathered wasn't the same as destroyed. The cabin stood solid on its stone foundation. The windows were intact. The porch sagged slightly but hadn't collapsed. This was survivable. This was more than they had. Maya signed the documents electronically at 8:47 that morning, her hand shaking slightly as she typed her name. 48 hours, Catherine had said. In 48 hours, they'd own something. The impossibility of it made Maya's chest tight. The family's reaction came within 6 hours. Maya's phone exploded with calls and texts from relatives she hadn't heard for months. Her uncle David, Margaret's younger brother, called 4 times before Maya finally answered. "I heard about Margaret's place," he said without preamble. "Hell of a thing, leaving it to you. Not that I'm saying you don't deserve it, but you know how impractical that property is, right? Middle of nowhere, barely habitable. I actually tried to help Margaret sell it before she passed, get something useful out of it. Catherine mentioned you offered $10,000. David's laugh was forced. That was a friendly offer, family helping family. But look, I know you're in a tight spot right now. I could take that property off your hands, save you the headache. I'll give you $15,000 cash. That's more than fair for a place that needs at least 50 grand in repairs." Maya's fingers tightened around the phone. If it needs 50,000 in repairs, why would you offer 15 for it? Silence. Then, "I'm trying to help you, Maya. That place is a money pit. You can't afford to maintain it. Then I guess it's good I'll be living in it instead of maintaining it as a second home." "You're moving there?" David's disbelief was almost comical. "With Lily? Maya, there's no work up there. No school's worth a damn. You'll be hours from civilization. There's nothing for me in Sacramento except debt and eviction. At least in the mountains, we'll have a roof over our heads that nobody can take away. You're making a mistake." David's voice hardened. "That property has been nothing but a burden on this family for decades. Margaret was a stubborn old woman who refused to see reason, and you're following right in her footsteps." "Then I guess stubbornness runs in the family," Maya said, and ended the call. The text continued throughout the day. Her cousin Jennifer, whom Maya remembered as the golden child who'd gotten everything handed to her, heard about the cabin. "Mom says you should sell it before you get stuck with the taxes. We know a developer who'd give you $20K. Uncle David's wife, Patricia. David is just trying to help. That property has bad memories for the family. You should let it go." Even Maya's own father called, his voice thick with the disappointment that had colored every conversation they'd had since she'd married Daniel against his advice. "Your uncle knows that land. If he says it's worthless, you should listen. This is just like you, Maya, being stubborn about something you don't understand. Did any of you visit Margaret before she died?" Maya asked quietly. Her father's silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought. The cabin's mine, Dad. I'm taking Lily and we're moving there. You can either support that or not, but you won't change my mind." She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking with anger on something else, a growing certainty that their desperation to buy the property meant it was worth more than they were admitting. Margaret's letter echoed in her mind. "They'll tell you it's worthless. Don't let them convince you." 2 days later, the deed transfer was complete. Maya Chen was officially the owner of 43 acres in the Sierra Nevada mountains. She looked at the document on her phone screen, at her name in official legal text, and felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope. Preparing to move with $800 to their name required brutal triage. Maya sold everything they didn't absolutely need through Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. The couch that had come with the apartment, $60. The TV that barely worked, $40. Kitchen appliances, dishes, books, clothes that didn't fit, toys Lily had outgrown, everything went. Each transaction was a small violence, stripping their life down to what would fit in their aging Honda Civic. The car worried Maya most. The 2008 sedan had 187,000 miles and a concerning rattle in the engine. The mechanic she couldn't afford to pay had given her a sympathetic look when she'd asked how much longer it would last. Hard to say. Could go another year, could die tomorrow. If you're planning a long trip, I'd pray. Maya added prayer to her list of desperate measures, alongside packing and job hunting in mountain towns she'd never visited. The remote work applications she submitted to customer service companies and medical transcription services disappeared into automated response systems. Her nursing license was valid statewide, but the rural hospitals near Donner Summit weren't hiring, and the commute to Reno or Sacramento would eat whatever she earned in gas money. Still, they had a destination. That was more than many people in their situation could say. Lily handled the transition with heartbreaking resilience, packing her stuffed animals and explaining to each one that they were going on an adventure to the mountains. She drew pictures of what she imagined the cabin would look like, always with smoke curling from the chimney and flowers in window boxes that Maya was certain didn't exist. "Will there be bears?" Lily asked the night before they left, her voice excited rather than afraid. "Maybe," Maya admitted. "We'll have to be careful about food storage. And deer. And maybe foxes. Probably lots of wildlife." Lily's smile was genuine for the first time in weeks. "I'm going to learn all their names." Maya pulled her daughter close, breathing in her optimism like oxygen. If Lily could face this move with excitement, Maya could manage cautious hope. The day they left Sacramento, the Honda packed so full they could barely see out the back window. Maya took one last look at the apartment that had been their home. The landlord had been unmoved by her early departure, keeping their security deposit and a last month's rent she'd somehow scraped together. Fare was a luxury she couldn't afford to demand. "Ready, baby?" Maya asked as Lily buckled into the back seat, the stuffed rabbit secured beside her. "Ready, Mama." The drive up Interstate 80 should have taken 4 hours. It took 6 because Maya couldn't afford to speed, couldn't risk a ticket, or pushing the Honda's failing engine too hard. They stopped twice for bathroom breaks at rest stops, where Maya let Lily run in circles, burning off nervous energy while Maya calculated gas money and tried not to think about what they'd do if the car broke down before they reached the cabin. The elevation increased as they climbed into the Sierra Nevada, leaving behind Sacramento's valley heat for the crisp mountain air of early September. Lily pressed her face against the window, watching pine trees replace palm trees, granite cliffs rise where strip malls had sprawled. "It's beautiful," she whispered. It was beautiful, Maya had to admit. Also terrifying. The towns grew smaller and farther apart. Cell service became spotty, then disappeared entirely. When they finally turned onto the dirt road that Catherine had marked on the map she'd provided, Maya's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The road wound through dense forest for 3 miles, barely wide enough for one vehicle, potholes threatening to tear off the Honda's already questionable suspension. Twice Maya thought they'd taken a wrong turn. Then the trees opened up and the cabin appeared. Maya's breath caught. The photos hadn't lied exactly, but they hadn't captured the full reality either. The cabin was small, yes, maybe even smaller than it had appeared in pictures. The cedar siding was weathered gray, the roof definitely needed replacing, and the porch did sag slightly on one side. But it stood solid against a backdrop of towering pines, smokeless chimney pointing at a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The windows were intact, curtains visible behind dusty glass. A stone path led from where the driveway ended to the front steps. "Mama," Lily breathed. It looked like a fairy tale. It looked like hard work, Maya thought. It looked like survival. It looked like theirs. She killed the engine, and they sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the reality of their new home. No neighbors visible through the trees. No traffic sounds. No city noise at all. Just wind in the pines and the distant call of a bird Maya couldn't identify. "We're not going back, right?" Lily asked suddenly, her voice small. Maya turned to look at her daughter, seeing the fear beneath the excitement. Lily had learned young that good things could be taken away, that stability was temporary, that nothing was ever really theirs. "We're not going back." Maya promised. "This is ours now. Nobody can take it away. Promise?" "I promise, baby." They got out of the car and stood in the clearing, breathing mountain air that smelled like pine and earth and possibility. Catherine had mailed the key, which Maya now pulled from her pocket, its weight substantial and real. The cabin door stuck, swollen from moisture or age, and Maya had to push hard to get it open. It swung inward with a groan of protest, revealing a dim interior that smelled of dust and old wood and something else, something that might have been lavender. One large room served as kitchen and living area, dominated by a riverstone fireplace that took up most of one wall. A wood-burning cookstove sat in the kitchen corner, and yes, there was a sink, though Maya would need to figure out how the well pump worked. Faded curtains hung in the windows. A worn couch faced the fireplace. A small table with 2 chairs occupied the space between kitchen and living area. The bedroom was barely big enough for the double bed it contained, and the bathroom was a tiny space with a toilet, a sink, and a shower stall that had seen better days. Everything was old, worn, dated to decades Maya hadn't lived through. But everything was clean, as if Margaret had tidied before leaving on a journey from which she knew she wouldn't return. "It's perfect," Lily announced, spinning in a circle in the main room. Perfect was generous, but it was theirs. Maya felt something loosen in her chest, some knot of fear that had been pulled tight for 3 years finally beginning to ease. They spent the rest of the afternoon unloading the car, which didn't take long given how little they brought. Maya figured out the basics of the wood stove with help from a manual she found tucked into a kitchen drawer, and by evening they had heat, which was good because the September temperature was already dropping as the sun set. They ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner, sitting on the sagging porch and watching the sky turn colors Maya had never seen in Sacramento's light-polluted evening. Lily talked nonstop about the trees and the birds and whether they'd see a deer tomorrow, her excitement overriding her exhaustion. When full dark fell, the stars emerged in numbers that made Maya's throat tight. She'd forgotten stars could look like this, dense and bright and infinite. Lily fell asleep against her shoulder, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, and Maya sat in the darkness of their new home, listening to the forest settle around them. They'd made it. Against every odd, despite every obstacle, they'd survived the drive and reached their destination. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, she knew. They needed to find work, find a school for Lily, figure out how to live in a cabin with no central heating and questionable plumbing. The $800 wouldn't last long, even with no rent to pay. But tonight, sitting on their porch under more stars than she could count, Maya let herself feel the accomplishment. They'd escaped Sacramento's debt trap. They owned something. They had a foundation to build from. She carried Lily to the bedroom and tucked her into the bed they'd share, then stood in the doorway watching her daughter sleep, safe and warm in theirs. This cabin might be small and rustic and hours from anything resembling civilization, but it was more than they'd had yesterday. Maya returned to the porch, too wired to sleep despite her exhaustion. The forest sounds were unfamiliar, rustlings and calls that her city-trained brain couldn't interpret. She should be inside, should be sleeping, should be conserving energy for tomorrow's challenges. Instead, she walked the perimeter of the clearing, her phone's flashlight revealing the edges of their property. 43 acres, Catherine had said. Maya couldn't see the boundaries in the darkness, couldn't comprehend that much space belonging to them. It felt impossible, like a gift too large to accept. Near the back of the cabin, her flashlight caught something that made her stop. A small shed she hadn't noticed in the fading evening light, its door slightly ajar. Maya approached cautiously, remembering Lily's question about bears and wondering what kind of animals might have made homes in abandoned structures. But the shed held no animals, just tools and supplies Margaret must have used to maintain the property. Axes and saws, coils of rope, boxes of nails and screws, cans of paint and stain in various states of preservation. A workbench ran along one wall, and above it, someone had tacked up a faded photograph. Maya aimed her flashlight at the picture, revealing a younger version of Margaret standing in front of the cabin, her arms around a man Maya didn't recognize. Both were smiling with the unself-conscious joy of people who thought they had all the time in the world. On the back of the photograph, in faded ink, someone had written, "Robert and Margaret, summer 1965. First summer in our cabin." Our cabin. Margaret had built a life here, had made this rustic structure into a home worth photographing, worth remembering. Maya felt tears prick her eyes as she carefully tucked the photograph in her pocket, a piece of the cabin's history to share with Lily when she was older. The shed also held something unexpected, a newer filing cabinet wedged into the corner behind the workbench. Maya pulled it open, finding folders meticulously labeled with Margaret's neat handwriting. Property taxes, paid receipts going back decades. Utility records for propane delivery. Maintenance logs documenting every repair, every improvement, every dollar spent on the cabin. And beneath these practical documents, a folder simply labeled for Maya. Maya's hand shook as she opened it, her flashlight revealing a handwritten letter on top of a stack of additional papers. "Dear Maya, if you're reading this, you've made it to the cabin and you're braver than I gave you credit for. I know the family tried to talk you out of coming. They always underestimate the stubborn ones. The cabin requires work, but it's sound. The roof needs replacing within the next 2 years. I've left contact information for a roofer in Truckee who'll give you a fair price. The well is good for another decade, at least. The septic was replaced in 2015 and should last another 30 years with proper maintenance. What I couldn't tell Catherine, what I couldn't put in any official document, because the family would have destroyed everything to prevent you from getting it, is this: the cabin isn't the real inheritance. It's just the key. Under the woodshed's floor, beneath the false bottom I installed in 1998, you'll find the truth about what this property really is. I couldn't give it to you directly. I had to make it look worthless so David and the others wouldn't fight the will. But you'll understand once you look beneath the surface. Don't tell anyone what you find. Not yet. Not until you've secured it properly and know who you could trust. The family has been trying to take this land for 30 years, and they won't stop just because it's legally yours now. You're stronger than you know, Maya. Trust yourself. With love, Aunt Margaret." Maya read the letter 3 times, her mind spinning. Under the woodshed's floor. A false bottom. The real inheritance. She looked around the small shed, at the worn wooden floorboards that had seemed unremarkable when she'd first entered. Now they pulsed with possibility and danger and questions she didn't know how to answer. It was after midnight. Lily was asleep in the cabin. Maya was alone in a strange place, reading a letter from a dead woman who claimed the cabin was just a key to something larger. The smart thing would be to wait until morning, to process this information in daylight, to approach whatever secret Margaret had hidden with preparation and caution. But Maya had spent 3 years being careful, being smart, making rational decisions that had still left them evicted and desperate. Tonight, standing in the shed under stars she'd never seen in the city, reading a letter from the aunt who believed in her enough to leave her everything, Maya felt reckless. She cleared the tools from the center of the shed, stacking them carefully against the walls. The floorboards looked identical, no obvious seams or catches. Maya ran her hands along each board, pressing and prodding, looking for anything that might indicate a hidden compartment. There, in the back corner, barely visible even when she knew to look for it, one board sat slightly higher than its neighbors. Maya pried at it with a screwdriver from the tool bench, her hands shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. The board lifted, revealing a space beneath the shed floor. Maya's flashlight illuminated metal, a lockbox approximately 2 feet square, its surface scratched and dented from age, but its padlock still intact. Maya's hands trembled as she lifted the box from its hiding place. It was heavy, substantial, filled with something that shifted slightly as she moved it. A small envelope was taped to the top, her name written in Margaret's handwriting. Inside the envelope was a key and another note, brief this time. The rest is in the cabin basement. This is just the beginning. Cabin basement. Maya's mind raced. She hadn't seen any basement entrance, hadn't noticed stairs or a cellar door in her initial exploration. But the cabin was old, built when basements were common for food storage and shelter. She carried the lockbox back to the cabin, moving as quietly as she could to avoid waking Lily. The key from the envelope fit the padlock perfectly, and Maya opened it with shaking hands. Inside were documents, legal papers, property surveys, photographs, and bundles of something that made Maya's breath stop. Cash, stacks of $100 bills, bound with rubber bands, filling the bottom half of the box. Maya's first wild thought was that she'd found drug money, that Margaret had been involved in something illegal. But the documents told a different story, one that made Maya's hands shake as she began to understand. The property surveys showed the 43 acres extended far beyond what Maya had assumed. The cabin sat at the edge of what the surveys revealed was actually a 160-acre parcel, the additional land hidden behind forest and terrain that made it invisible from the cabin itself. And on that additional land, according to surveys dated 1998, sat abandoned buildings from something called the Summit Sierra Mine, a gold mining operation that had closed in 1942. Maya spread the documents across the cabin's small table, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. Margaret hadn't just left her cabin. She'd left her a defunct gold mine on 160 acres of Sierra Nevada mountain land. The cash in the box, Maya counted it 3 times to be sure, totaled $47,000. The note tucked beneath the bills explained, emergency funds. The mine's value is in what it might still contain, not what's in this box. Use this to give yourself time to explore properly. Maya's head spun. $47,000. A gold mine. 160 acres. No wonder the family had been so desperate to buy the property for pennies. They'd known, or suspected, what Margaret really owned. The letter in the bottom of the box, longer this time, filled in the gaps. My dear Maya, by now you've found the money and the surveys. You're probably terrified, confused, maybe thinking this is too much to handle alone. It is too much, which is why I'm going to tell you everything I should have told someone years ago. My husband Robert bought this land in 1952 from the estate of a man named Harrison Caldwell, who'd owned the Summit Sierra Mine. The mine closed in 1942 when the government ordered all gold mining operations shut down for the war effort. Most mines never reopened. Most miners moved on. Robert was a geologist. He bought the land for the cabin site, planned to build a retirement home here. He didn't care about the mine, figured whatever gold Harrison's family hadn't already extracted was long gone. We built our cabin in 1952, spent every summer here until Robert died in 1976. After Robert passed, I couldn't bear to sell the land, but I couldn't afford to keep it either. I was looking through Robert's old papers, planning to list the property, when I found his geological surveys from the 1960s. He'd continued exploring the mine, more out of scientific interest than profit motive. His notes suggested the original miners had barely scratched the surface. The richest veins ran deep, deeper than 1940s technology could safely reach. I spent the next 20 years teaching myself enough geology to understand Robert's surveys. I explored the mine carefully, never going deep enough to be dangerous, but far enough to find evidence he was right. The Summit Sierra mine wasn't played out. It was barely started. I couldn't mine it myself. I didn't have the expertise or the capital. I couldn't sell it because the family would have swooped in, taken over, pushed me out of my own property. So I waited. I kept the secret. I lived simply, saved every penny, and documented everything so that whoever inherited the land would have the information they needed. That person is you, Maya. Not because you're family, though you are. Not because I owe you, though I owed you better than silence all those years you struggled. But because you're stubborn enough to fight for it and smart enough to know when to ask for help. The basement entrance is behind the river stone fireplace. Push on the stone third from the left, second row from the floor. It's a pressure release I installed in 1998 when I created the document repository below. Everything you need is down there. Robert's geological surveys, my exploration notes, professional assessments I paid for under false names, and evidence of what the mine might still contain. Current estimates put the potential gold reserves at between $180 and $227 million, depending on market values and extraction costs. The land itself is worth at least $40 million without the mine, given development pressure in the Sierra Nevada. You own this, Maya. All of it. But the family knows something valuable exists here, even if they don't know exactly what. They'll try every trick to separate you from this property. Don't let them. Trust yourself. Trust Robert's science. And when you're ready, trust a lawyer named Samuel Brennan in Reno. I've left a retainer with his firm. His number is in the basement documents. You're not alone in this, even though it feels that way. Fight for Lily. Fight for yourself. And remember that sometimes the most valuable inheritances come disguised as burdens. With all my love, Aunt Margaret. Maya sat in the pre-dawn darkness, surrounded by documents and cash and the weight of impossible revelations. $227 million. A gold mine. Land her uncle had tried to buy for $10,000. Her hands shook as she carefully gathered the documents, stacking them back into the lockbox. The money she left on the table, staring at the stacks of bills that represented more than she earned in 2 years. Emergency funds, Margaret had called it. Time to explore properly. Time to understand exactly what she'd inherited. The fireplace beckoned, its river stones dark and silent in the cabin shadows. Maya approached it slowly, counting stones from the left, finding the third in the second row. She pressed gently, expecting resistance. The stones sank inward with a soft click. A section of the fireplace swung inward, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Maya's flashlight illuminated rough wooden steps leading down into a basement that shouldn't exist in a rustic mountain cabin built in 1952. But it did exist. Margaret had built it. And somewhere in the darkness below waited the truth about what Maya had really inherited and what the family would do to take it away. Maya descended the stairs carefully, each step creaking under her weight. The beam from her flashlight revealed a space that defied everything she'd assumed about the cabin above. This wasn't a simple root cellar or storage area. This was a purpose-built archive, climate-controlled and organized with the meticulous care of someone who understood exactly what they were protecting. The basement stretched beneath the entire footprint of the cabin, its walls lined with industrial shelving units that looked far too modern for a structure built in the 1950s. Metal filing cabinets stood against one wall, each drawer labeled in Margaret's precise handwriting. A work table occupied the center of the space, its surface clear except for a leather portfolio positioned exactly in the middle, as if waiting for Maya's arrival. Maya pulled the chain on an overhead light, surprised when fluorescent bulbs flickered to life. Of course, Margaret had wired the basement. She'd spent 20 years building this repository, protecting these secrets. She wouldn't have left them in darkness. The portfolio contained a handwritten index, guiding Maya through the archive's contents with the efficiency of a professional librarian. Section A, Original Property Documents and Mining Claims, 1890 to 1952. Section B, Robert's Geological Surveys, 1955 to 1975. Section C, Margaret's Exploration Notes, 1976 to 2018. Section D, Professional Assessments and Valuations, 1998 to 2023. Maya pulled files at random, her hands trembling as she tried to process the scope of what Margaret had documented. Robert's geological surveys were dense, with technical language she barely understood, but the hand-drawn maps were clear enough. The Summit Sierra mine extended deep into the mountain, with multiple shafts and tunnels that Robert had carefully charted. His notes from 1967 were particularly detailed. Main vein extends at least 400 feet beyond where Caldwell's operation stopped. Surface samples show gold concentration of 2.3 ounces per ton, significantly higher than the 0.8 ounces per ton that made the original mining profitable. Conservative estimates suggest remaining reserves of 180,000 to 200,000 ounces. Current value approximately $360 million at $1,800 per Oz market price. Maya had to read the number 3 times before it felt real. $360 million. And that was Robert's estimate from 1967, before modern extraction technology, before gold prices had fluctuated through decades of economic change. Margaret's notes picked up where Robert's ended, documenting her own careful exploration of the mine's accessible tunnels. Unlike Robert's scientific precision, Margaret wrote with the voice of someone teaching herself as she went, recording both successes and mistakes with equal honesty. June 1982. Explored the eastern shaft to approximately 200 feet. Found evidence of a cave-in that blocked further progress, but managed to extract samples from the accessible seam. Testing confirms Robert's estimates were conservative, if anything. This mountain is full of gold that Harrison Caldwell never reached. September 1990. Hired a mining engineer from Colorado to assess the property under the pretense of evaluating it for sale. He confirmed Robert's surveys and estimated current value of remaining reserves at $280 million, assuming modern extraction methods. Paid him in cash and made him sign an NDA. He asked twice if I planned to develop the mine. I told him I was too old to start such projects. He looked relieved. March 1998. David showed up unannounced, asking questions about the property's potential value. He'd clearly been researching, probably found some reference to the Summit Sierra mine in historical records. Offered me $50,000, claimed he wanted to preserve family land. I laughed in his face and told him the cabin was worth that much for the timber alone. He left angry. Started construction on the basement archive the next week. If David knows enough to be sniffing around, I need to protect the documentation. The files went on, year after year of Margaret's careful stewardship. She commissioned new geological surveys every 5 years, paid for by cash, so there would be no paper trail connecting her to professional mining assessments. She'd photographed every tunnel entrance, every seam, every piece of evidence that the mine was far from played out. And she'd tracked gold prices with the dedication of a day trader, calculating and recalculating the mine's potential value as markets shifted. Her most recent estimate, dated January 2023, just months before her death, put the figure at $227 million, accounting for current gold prices, estimated extraction costs, and the reality that not every ounce of gold in the ground could be economically recovered. Maya sank into the chair at the work table, her mind struggling to process the weight of what she'd inherited. $227 million, hidden beneath 43 acres of forest that her family had dismissed as worthless. Margaret had known exactly what she was doing when she structured her will, when she waited 6 months to let Maya be contacted, when she made the cabin sound like a burden rather than a treasure. A separate file contained correspondence with Samuel Brennan, the Reno lawyer Margaret had mentioned. The retainer agreement showed Margaret had paid him $25,000 in 2022 to provide legal services to whoever inherited the property. His specialty was mining law and property rights, and his cover letter to Maya was direct and sobering. Ms. Chen, if you're reading this, Margaret has passed, and you've discovered what she left you. I'll be blunt. You're about to face challenges from people who will stop at nothing to take this property from you. Your family knows something valuable exists here, even if they don't know the full extent. They will attack your claim, question the will, try to prove undue influence or mental incapacity. They will make your life a living hell. My job is to make sure they fail. Margaret paid me well to protect her heirs' interests, and I take my obligations seriously. Call me the moment you're ready to move forward. Don't discuss the mine with anyone. Don't hint at its value. Don't give them ammunition to use against you in court. Most importantly, don't let them convince you that you can't handle this. Margaret believed you could. I'm prepared to help you prove her right. The letter included Brennan's contact information and a personal cell number for emergencies. Maya photographed the letter with her phone, then carefully replaced it in the file. Emergency. She didn't even know what that would look like yet, but she had a feeling she'd find out soon. The sound of footsteps above made Maya's heart jump. She'd been so absorbed in the documents that she'd lost track of time. Dawn light was filtering through the basement's small, ground-level windows. Lily was awake. "Mama." Lily's voice called from above, uncertain in the unfamiliar space. Maya quickly climbed the stairs, closing the hidden door behind her. The fireplace section clicked back into place seamlessly, looking like nothing more than old stones arranged in a pattern someone had found appealing decades ago. Right here, baby. Maya emerged from behind the fireplace, trying to look like she'd simply been examining the stonework rather than discovering multi-million-dollar secrets in a hidden basement. Lily stood in her pajamas, the stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. Where were you? I woke up and you weren't in bed. Just exploring. Couldn't sleep. Maya pulled Lily into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter and trying to anchor herself in the present moment. How about we make breakfast? See if Aunt Margaret left us anything to cook with. The kitchen yielded basic supplies that Margaret had apparently restocked before her final illness. Canned goods, dried pasta, rice, beans, coffee, powdered milk. The propane stove worked once Maya figured out the pilot light, and within an hour they were eating scrambled eggs made from powder and canned ham, sitting at the small table while morning light filled the cabin. What are we going to do today? Lily asked, her spirits high despite the rustic breakfast. Maya's mind spun with possibilities and dangers. She needed to understand the property's boundaries, locate the mine entrances Margaret had documented, figure out how to protect their claim while appearing to own nothing more valuable than a worn-out cabin. She needed to call Samuel Brennan, establish legal protection before the family escalated their pressure. She needed to find work, enroll Lily in school, figure out how to live a normal life while sitting on a $227 million secret. Today, Maya said, forcing her voice to stay calm and normal, we're going to explore our new home. See what 43 acres looks like when you walk it. They spent the morning hiking the property's immediate surroundings, following rough trails that Margaret had apparently maintained over the years. Lily ran ahead, her earlier exhaustion forgotten in the excitement of forest exploration. She found a creek that bordered the eastern edge of the clearing, its water so clear Maya could see smooth stones on the bottom. She discovered a fallen log covered in moss that looked like something from a fairy tale. She collected pine cones and interesting rocks, filling her pockets with treasures that cost nothing and meant everything to an 8-year-old seeing wilderness for the first time. Maya let Lily explore while she tried to orient herself using the property maps she'd memorized from the basement archive. The cabin sat in the southwest corner of what the survey showed was actually 160 acres, not the 43 the deed officially recorded. Margaret had been clever, filing paperwork that split the original parcel to make the cabin's plot appear to be the entire property. The additional 117 acres were technically held in a separate land trust that Margaret controlled, structured to transfer to whoever inherited the cabin. The mine entrances were scattered across the larger parcel, hidden in terrain that was accessible only by rough trails through dense forest. Margaret's maps showed 5 main shafts, each carefully marked with GPS coordinates and notes about structural stability. The primary entrance, the one Robert had used for his exploration, was approximately a mile northeast of the cabin, hidden in a ravine that was invisible from any direction until you were standing directly at its edge. Mama, look! Lily's excited voice pulled Maya's attention. Her daughter was crouched beside a patch of disturbed earth, pointing at tracks pressed into the soft soil. Bear tracks. Real bear tracks. Maya's protective instincts flared as she quickly joined Lily, examining the prints. They were definitely bear tracks, probably from a night before given how fresh they looked. A reminder that they weren't alone in these mountains. That wilderness came with real dangers along with its beauty. We need to be very careful about food, Maya said, keeping her voice calm so Lily wouldn't panic. Bears have an incredible sense of smell. We can't leave anything outside that might attract them. Should we go back to the cabin? Not yet, but we should stay alert. Make noise while we walk so we don't surprise any animals. They continued exploring, Lily now singing loudly as she walked, her off-key rendition of songs from school musicals echoing through the forest. Maya used the noise to cover her own reconnaissance, identifying landmarks from Margaret's maps and getting a feel for the property's layout. By noon, they'd covered maybe a third of the immediate area, and both were exhausted. They returned to the cabin for lunch, eating more canned food, while Lily chattered about everything she'd seen. Maya listened with half her attention, the other half calculating how long their supplies would last and what she'd need to buy on their next trip to town. The money from the lockbox solved immediate problems, But Maya knew better than to flash cash in a small mountain community where strangers were noticed and questions were asked. She needed to be strategic, buying only what was necessary, paying for everything in small bills that wouldn't raise eyebrows. After lunch, while Lily was absorbed in drawing pictures of their morning exploration, Maya called Samuel Brennan from the cabin's landline. The phone service was another surprise Margaret had maintained, an old-fashioned connection that worked even when cell service disappeared in the mountain's dead zones. Brennan answered on the second ring, his voice gruff but not unkind. Samuel Brennan. Mr. Brennan, this is Maya Chen. I'm calling about. I know exactly who you are, Miss Chen. Margaret's was filed 6 weeks ago. I've been expecting your call. His tone shifted, becoming more formal and careful. I assume you found what she left for you. The cabin, yes. We arrived yesterday. I'm not talking about the cabin. A pause, heavy with meaning. Have you explored the property thoroughly? Maya glanced at Lily, still absorbed in her drawings. I found the archive, and the documents explaining what the property actually contains. Good. Don't say anything more over the phone. Lines can be monitored, and I guarantee your family is paying attention to anything that might give them leverage. Papers rustled in the background. I could drive up tomorrow if you're available. We need to discuss strategy before they make their next move. They've already been calling, offering to buy the property. Of course they have. How much? Started at 10,000, went up to 20. Brennan's laugh was sharp and humorless. 20,000 for a property worth, conservatively, $40 million before you even factor in the mine. These people have no shame. Don't engage with them further. If they call, tell them you're represented by counsel and give them my number. I'll handle all communication. I can't afford a lawyer. Not beyond what Margaret already paid for. Margaret paid me enough to see this through to the end, whatever that looks like. My retainer covers everything until the property is secured in your name beyond any legal challenge. After that, we can discuss contingency arrangements if you decide to develop the mine. The casual way he said develop the mine made Maya's stomach clench. Development meant equipment, expertise, permits, environmental studies, costs that would dwarf the $47,000 in emergency funds Margaret had left her. Mr. Brennan, I'm a nurse with $800 to my name and a daughter to support. I can't develop a gold mine. You can't develop it alone, he corrected. But there are mining companies that would partner with you, providing capital and expertise in exchange for a percentage of the profits. Margaret documented several potential partners in her research. We need to vet them carefully, but the options exist. First, I have to keep the property. Exactly, which is why I need to meet with you tomorrow. Can you be available around 10 in the morning? Maya agreed, taking down the additional information Brennan provided about what to expect, what to avoid saying to the family, and how to document any harassment or pressure. After hanging up, she stood in the cabin's small kitchen, staring out the window at trees that concealed $227 million in gold, trying to reconcile her life as she'd known it with the impossible reality Margaret had gifted her. The rest of the day passed in domestic routine that felt surreal given what Maya now knew. She and Lily cleaned the cabin thoroughly, discovering more of Margaret's careful preparations. The bedroom closet contained winter clothes in various sizes, including items that would fit both Maya and Lily. The bathroom cabinet held toiletries and first aid supplies. The kitchen cupboards revealed cooking equipment and dishes for two. Margaret had prepared for their arrival like someone expecting specific guests, even though she'd never met Lily and hadn't seen Maya since she was a teenager. The thoughtfulness made Maya's chest tight with grief for the aunt she'd barely known, the woman who'd believed in her enough to leave her everything. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Maya returned to the basement archive. She needed to understand the mine's layout, the geological surveys that promised such staggering wealth, and the risks involved in claiming what was legally hers but practically impossible for her to access. Robert's surveys were technical, but Maya forced herself to work through them with the same determination she'd applied to nursing school. She might not have a geology degree, but she could read maps and follow logical arguments about rock formations and mineral deposits. The Summit Sierra mine had operated from 1895 to 1942, extracting what the historical record showed was approximately 85,000 ounces of gold. profitable for its time, but nowhere near the mine's full potential. The original miners had followed the obvious veins, the gold closest to the surface and easiest to reach. They'd stopped when the war required all gold mining to cease, and they'd never returned because the owners had died and the property was sold to people who didn't know or care about mining. Robert had recognized what the original miners missed. The main gold vein didn't just run horizontally through the mountain. It descended at an angle, going deeper into formations that 1940s technology couldn't safely access. His surveys, conducted with 1960s equipment that was primitive by modern standards but advanced for its time, suggested the richest deposits were 400 to 600 feet below the deepest point the original miners had reached. Margaret's more recent surveys, conducted with modern ground-penetrating radar and advanced geological analysis, confirmed Robert's theories. The gold was there, waiting in concentrations that made the original mine's profitability look modest. Current extraction technology could reach it safely, though the costs would be substantial. One file contained cost estimates Margaret had compiled from various sources, carefully disguising her inquiries as academic research or hypothetical scenarios. To properly develop the mine would require $40 to $60 million in initial investment. Equipment, infrastructure, environmental compliance, labor, security, transportation, processing facilities. The list went on, each item representing expenses Maya couldn't begin to cover. But the projected returns made the investment costs almost trivial. Conservative estimates put total extractable gold at 180,000 ounces. At current market prices around $1,900 per ounce, the gross value approached $342 million. Even after extraction costs, environmental remediation, taxes, and partnership splits with whoever provided development capital, the net profit to the mineral rights owner would be substantial. Maya did the math 3 times, using different scenarios and conservative assumptions. Even in the worst-case scenario, where extraction costs ran over budget and gold prices dropped, she'd still be looking at personal profit of at least $80 million. The best-case scenarios approached $180 million after all expenses. The numbers were too large to feel real. Maya had spent 3 years struggling to cover a $1,200 rent payment. The idea of $80 million, let alone $180 million, belonged to a different universe than the one she inhabited. A sound outside the cabin made Maya freeze, her heart suddenly racing. Footsteps on the porch, deliberate and heavy. Someone was here. She quickly closed the files, shut off the basement light, and climbed the stairs silently. Through the gap in the hidden door, she could see the cabin's main room, illuminated by the single lamp she'd left burning. The footsteps circled the porch, pausing at each window as if someone was looking inside. Maya's phone was upstairs. The landline was in the kitchen, visible from the windows. If she moved to call for help, whoever was outside would see her. And help was miles away, assuming 911 even worked this far into the mountains. The front door's knob turned slowly. Maya had locked it, she was certain. But the door pushed open anyway, the frame splintering slightly where the old lock had given way to force. A man stepped inside, silhouetted against the moonlight. Not family, at least not any family member Maya recognized. Tall, heavy-set, wearing work clothes and boots caked with mud. He pulled a flashlight from his belt and swept it across the cabin, pausing when the beam found the table where Maya had left some of Margaret's documents before dinner. "I know you're in here somewhere," the man called out, his voice rough but not threatening. "Found your car. Lights are on. Fresh food in the kitchen. You might as well come out." Maya's mind raced. She could stay hidden, hope he'd leave. But Lily was upstairs, asleep in the bedroom. If this man had bad intentions, Maya needed to put herself between him and her daughter. She pushed open the hidden door and stepped out from behind the fireplace, keeping her hands visible. "Who are you? What do you want?" The man spun, his flashlight finding Maya immediately. For a long moment, they stared at each other, predator and prey evaluating each other in the cabin's dim light. Then the man's expression shifted, surprise replacing whatever calculation he'd been running. "You're really Margaret's niece? The one who inherited? Who are you?" Maya repeated, her voice steadier than she felt. "Name's Jack Morrison. I work for David Chen, your uncle. He sent me to check on the property, make sure nobody was squatting or causing damage." Jack's gaze drifted to the documents on the table. "Didn't expect to find you actually living here. The property is mine. I have every right to be here." Sure. No argument there." Jack's tone was placating, but his eyes continued scanning the cabin, cataloging everything he saw. "David just wants to make sure you understand what you're taking on. This place needs work. Could be dangerous, especially with a kid." "How did you know I have a daughter?" Jack's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Small town, Mrs. Chun. People notice a woman and a little girl showing up at Margaret's old cabin. People talk. It's not Margaret's old cabin anymore. It's my cabin. And you're trespassing, breaking and entering, technically, since I busted your lock." "Sorry about that." He didn't sound sorry. "I'll tell David you're settled in. He'll probably want to come by himself, talk to you about his offer. Maybe explain some things about the property that the lawyer lady might not have mentioned. If David wants to talk to me, he can call my lawyer. I'm not negotiating the sale of property. I just inherited." Jack's expression hardened slightly. "That's not very friendly, considering we're family." "We're not family. David is my uncle by blood, but that doesn't give him or his employees the right to break into my home in the middle of the night. It wasn't the middle of the night when I got here. More like 9 o'clock. You were already in bed." Maya realized her mistake. If she'd been in bed, she wouldn't have heard him on the porch, wouldn't have been alert when he entered. She'd reveal that she'd been awake, doing something she didn't want him to know about. "I was reading," Maya improvised. "Upstairs. I heard you trying the door." "Reading?" Jack's gaze drifted to the fireplace, lingering on the stones with an intensity that made Maya's skin prickle. Did he know about the hidden door? Had David told him to look for something specific? "You should leave," Maya said, crossing her arms. "Now, before I call the sheriff. Service is pretty spotty up here. You might have trouble getting through." But Jack moved toward the door, his flashlight still sweeping across the cabin. "I'll tell David you're not interested in selling." "But Maya, this mountain gets pretty lonely in winter. Pretty dangerous, too. Fires, snowstorms, animals. You might want to reconsider before the weather turns." The implied threat hung in the air as Jack stepped back onto the porch. Maya followed him to the door, watching as he walked to a pickup truck she hadn't noticed parked beyond the tree line. He drove away slowly, his headlights illuminating the clearing before disappearing down the dirt road. Maya locked the broken door as best she could, then shoved the heavy kitchen table against it for additional security. Her hands were shaking with adrenaline and fear. Jack Morrison might work for David, but his presence felt like more than a simple property check. He'd been looking for something, his attention drawn to the fireplace in a way that suggested he knew the cabin held secrets. She checked on Lily, finding her daughter still peacefully asleep, oblivious to the intrusion. Then Maya returned to the basement, her mind racing. If David knew enough to send someone snooping around, he might know about the hidden archive. He might not know the mine's full value, but he clearly suspected the property was worth more than he'd offered. Maya spent the rest of the night documenting everything in the archive that she could access quickly. She photographed documents, made notes about file locations, created a mental inventory of what existed and where Margaret had hidden it. If David or his people returned with more aggressive tactics, Maya needed backup copies of everything that proved the mine's value and her legal right to it. By the time dawn broke, Maya had transferred the most critical documents to her phone's cloud storage and hidden the physical originals in 3 separate locations throughout the basement. If someone found one cache, the others would survive. She was exhausted, running on adrenaline and coffee, when Samuel Brennan's truck pulled up to the cabin at exactly 10 a.m. The lawyer was older than Maya had expected, maybe 65, with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent significant time outdoors. He carried a battered briefcase and wore boots that had seen serious mileage. "Ms. Chun," he extended a hand, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Samuel Brennan, you look like you've had a rough night." Maya explained about Jack Morrison's visit while Brennan examined the broken door lock with professional attention. His expression darkened as she described the conversation, particularly Jack's interest in the fireplace. "They know something," Brennan said flatly. "Not the full picture, probably, but enough to be suspicious." Margaret was careful, but David's not stupid. He's been circling this property for decades. They sat at the cabin's small table, Lily occupied with coloring books in the bedroom, while Brennan laid out the legal landscape Maya was facing. "The will is solid," he began. "Margaret was evaluated by 3 independent physicians in the months before her death. All confirmed she was mentally competent, understood her decisions, and was acting without coercion. David and his family can contest the will, but they won't win that fight. Then what are they trying to do? Make your life difficult enough that you sell voluntarily. Harassment, intimidation, making the property feel unsafe or unmanageable. They'll try to convince you that keeping the cabin is more trouble than it's worth." Brennan pulled documents from his briefcase. "What they don't know is that you're not just keeping cabin. You're keeping a gold mine worth over $200 million. How do we protect that? If they suspect the mine exists, they can suspect all they want. Suspicion isn't proof, and even if they find proof, it doesn't change the legal reality. You own the surface rights and the mineral rights. Margaret made sure of that when she structured the property transfer. The mine is yours to develop or not develop as you see fit." Brennan spread maps across the table, pointing out the property boundaries and the locations of the various mine shafts. "Here's what we need to do in the short term. First, we file trespass notices against David and anyone working for him. Jack Morrison's visit last night gives us grounds for a restraining order if necessary. Second, we get the property properly secured. New locks, security cameras, motion sensors around the mine entrances. I know a guy who does private security for mining operations. He owes me a favor. I can't afford security cameras. Margaret's retainer covers it. She anticipated you'd need protection." He pulled out another document. "Third, we need to get you and your daughter legal residency established. Enroll her in school, get a local address on record, demonstrate that this is your primary home, not just a property you inherited and might sell. The stronger your connection to this place, the harder it is for the family to argue you're not serious about keeping it." Maya nodded, taking notes on a pad of paper she'd found in Margaret's desk. School enrollment, security upgrades, residency, establishment. Each task felt manageable individually, but together they represented a mountain of logistics she'd need to navigate while keeping Lily safe and finding a way to earn income. "What about the mine itself?" Maya asked. "If the gold is really there, if it's worth what Margaret's survey suggests, what do I do with that information?" Brennan leaned back, studying Maya with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "That depends on what you want. You have 3 basic options. 1, you develop the mine yourself, which requires partnership with a mining company since you don't have the capital. 2, you sell the property outright to someone who can develop it. 3, you lease the mineral rights to a mining company and collect royalties without giving up ownership. What did Margaret want me to do?" She didn't specify. Margaret was smart enough to know that what made sense for her might not make sense for you. She lived alone, had no dependents, no debt. You're raising a daughter, need income, can't afford to wait years for development profits. He pulled out a folder labeled Potential Partners. "I'd recommend starting with option 3. Lease the mineral rights to an established mining company. They handle all the costs and complexity. You collect quarterly royalty payments based on extraction volumes. How much are we talking about? Depends on the lease terms we negotiate, but typically mineral rights holders get 12 to 20% of gross profits after extraction costs. For a mine this size, with Margaret's documented reserves, you could be looking at $2 to $3 million annually once extraction ramps up to full production. Less in the first few years while they're setting up infrastructure, more later as they access the deeper veins. $2 to $3 million annually. Maya's mind couldn't process the number. She'd been excited about the $47,000 in emergency funds because it meant 6 months of breathing room. The idea of millions per year belonged to a fantasy, not her actual life. The catch, Brennan continued, is that any mining development will take 3 to 5 years from initial agreement to first production. Environmental permits, infrastructure construction, equipment installation, it's all heavily regulated and time-consuming. You won't see significant income immediately, but the emergency funds will carry you through the interim if you're careful. Margaret knew you'd need time to get established. He pulled out another document. I've already been in preliminary contact with 3 mining companies that operate in the Sierra Nevada. All are legitimate, financially stable, experienced with projects this size. If you're interested, I can set up meetings. Maya looked at the documents spread across the table, at the maps showing mineral deposits worth hundreds of millions, at the legal papers that proved this impossible inheritance was real. Then she looked toward the bedroom, where Lily was singing softly to herself, completely unaware that their lives had just transformed in ways Maya was still struggling to comprehend. Set up the meetings, Maya decided. But carefully. I don't want anyone knowing about this until we have solid agreements in place. If David finds out before we're legally protected, he'll do whatever it takes to challenge your claim, Brennan finished. Which is why we move quietly, document everything, and build an unassailable legal foundation before going public with the mine's value. They spent the next 2 hours reviewing strategy, going through Margaret's documentation, and establishing a timeline for the next steps. Brennan would file the trespass notices, arrange for security upgrades, and reach out to mining companies under the pretense of general inquiries. Maya would focus on establishing residency, enrolling Lily in school, and maintaining the appearance of someone simply trying to make a rustic cabin into a modest home. One more thing, Brennan said as he prepared to leave. Don't be surprised if David escalates his pressure once you file the trespass notices. Men like him don't handle rejection well, especially when they suspect they're being cut out of something valuable. You need to be prepared for legal threats, financial pressure, maybe worse. Worse like what? Harassment, intimidation, attempts to make the property unlivable. I'm not trying to scare you, just being realistic about what we're facing. He handed Maya a business card. You have my cell number. If anything happens, anything that makes you feel unsafe, you call me immediately. Day or night, doesn't matter. After Brennan left, Maya sat on the porch watching Lily chase butterflies in the clearing, her daughter's laughter echoing through the pine trees. 2 days ago, they'd been facing eviction in Sacramento, drowning in debt with no way out. Now, they owned 160 acres of mountain land, sitting on top of $227 million in gold, and Maya was negotiating mineral rights leases with mining companies. The transformation was so complete, so impossible, that Maya half expected to wake up and find it had all been a stress-induced dream. But the broken door lock was real. Jack Morrison's visit had been real. The documents in the basement archive were real. And so were the dangers Brennan had warned about. David wasn't going to give up just because Maya said no to his lowball offers. He'd been trying to acquire this property for 30 years. He'd sent someone to break into the cabin less than 48 hours after Maya arrived. Whatever came next would be worse. Maya pulled out her phone and pulled up the contact information for the sheriff's department. Brennan had said to document everything, to create a paper trail that would support trespass charges and restraining orders if necessary. The broken door lock was evidence. Jack Morrison's implied threats were evidence. She made the call, speaking with a deputy who promised to send someone out to take a report. The deputy arrived 2 hours later, a young man who seemed both bored and slightly sympathetic as he photographed the broken lock and took Maya's statement about the previous night's intrusion. "You'll want to get that lock replaced," he advised, writing notes on an official form. "Hardware store in Truckee carries good deadbolts. And maybe think about a security system. You're pretty isolated up here." "I'm working on it," Maya assured him. After the deputy left, Maya spent the afternoon making the cabin more secure. She found tools in Margaret's shed and installed a more substantial lock that she'd purchased during a quick trip to Truckee, leaving Lily with a neighbor who'd stopped by to welcome them to the area. She reinforced the windows with wooden bars that could be removed from inside, but would prevent entry from outside. She created an emergency plan, identifying escape routes, and designating a meeting spot in the forest where she and Lily would rendezvous if they ever had to leave the cabin quickly. The precautions felt paranoid until Maya remembered the mine's value, remembered Jack Morrison's calculating eyes and implied threats. She wasn't being paranoid. She was being realistic about what people might do for $227 million. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Maya returned to the basement to continue her inventory of Margaret's documentation. She was cataloging mineral rights documents when she found a file she'd missed before, tucked between surveys in a section labeled Personal Correspondence. Inside were letters, dozens of them, exchanged between Margaret and Robert during the years after his death. Maya read the dates 3 times before understanding. These weren't letters Robert had written. These were letters Margaret had written to Robert, chronicling her life, her discoveries, her growing understanding of what the mine represented. June 1982. Dearest Robert, I went into the eastern shaft today, following your maps to see what you'd seen. You were right about everything. The gold is there, waiting like you said it would be. I wish you were here to see this, to help me understand what to do with it. I'm not a geologist. I'm just a widow trying to honor your work. December 1990. I had to turn down another offer from David today. He's relentless, Robert. He doesn't know about the mine specifically, but he knows the land is valuable. If you were here, you'd know how to handle him. You were always better at dealing with people than I was. March 1998. I started building the basement archive today. If something happens to me before I can properly develop the mine, I need the next owner to have everything they need to do it right. I think it'll be Maya. She's so much like you, Robert, stubborn and smart and determined to make her own way. I hope I'm doing right by her. The letters went on, year after year of Margaret processing her grief and documenting her stewardship of Robert's legacy. They were heartbreaking and beautiful, a window into a woman Maya had barely known, but who had shaped her future in ways she was only beginning to understand. The final letter was dated January 2023, just weeks before Margaret's death. My darling Robert, I'm ready to join you now. The doctors say I have weeks, maybe days. I've done everything I can to protect the mine, to ensure it passes to someone who will value it as you did. Maya will inherit everything tomorrow. I'm trusting her with our life's work, with the dreams we built in this mountain. I hope I've given her enough tools to fight for it. I hope she's as strong as I believe she is. And I hope, wherever you are, you'll be proud of what I've done to honor your discoveries. I love you still, even after all these years. See you soon, my love. Margaret. Maya sat in the basement's fluorescent light, tears streaming down her face, feeling the weight of responsibility Margaret had entrusted to her. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about honoring 2 people who'd built something extraordinary and had no children of their own to pass it to. It was about proving worthy of their faith in her. She carefully replaced the letters in their file, adding them to her mental inventory of what needed to be protected. Then she climbed back to the cabin's main level, checked the new locks one more time, and allowed herself to sleep for the first time in 2 days. Her dreams were full of gold and darkness, of mountain tunnels that descended into wealth she couldn't access, of voices calling her name from depths she couldn't reach. She woke before dawn, her phone buzzing with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk about your situation. David Chun wants to make you a better offer. $100,000 for the cabin and land. Transfer completed within 30 days. This is more than fair for property in that condition. Call me at this number to discuss. Maya deleted the text without responding. Brennan had said not to engage, and she was going to follow that advice. But seeing the number jump from 20,000 to 100,000 confirmed what she'd suspected. David knew the property was valuable. He was getting desperate, which meant things were about to get worse before they got better. The offers escalated over the next week, each one more aggressive than the last. David himself showed up on Thursday afternoon, driving a luxury SUV that looked obscene parked next to Maya's battered Honda. He knocked politely, waited patiently when Maya didn't immediately answer, and finally called out through the door. Maya, I know you're in there. I just want to talk. Family to family. Maya had been expecting this. Brennan had warned her that David would eventually come personally once the intermediaries failed. She'd rehearsed what she'd say, how she'd handle it. But standing there with her uncle's voice filtering through the new deadbolt she'd installed, Maya felt her carefully prepared words dissolve into anger. She opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "My lawyer told you to communicate through him." David's smile was practiced, the expression of a man used to getting his way through charm when intimidation failed. "Samuel Brennan. Good lawyer, if a bit overprotective. But this is family business, Maya. We shouldn't need lawyers between us. We needed lawyers the moment you sent Jack Morrison to break into my home. That was a misunderstanding. Jack was checking on the property, didn't realize you'd already moved in. I've spoken to him about proper protocols." David's gaze drifted past Maya to the cabin's interior, cataloging everything visible. "Margaret really left you in a tough spot with this place. I know you're trying to make it work, but realistically, you can't afford to maintain mountain property on a nurse's salary. I'm managing fine. Are you?" David's expression shifted to something that might have been genuine concern if Maya didn't know better. "Because I heard you withdrew Lily from school in Sacramento. Haven't enrolled her anywhere up here yet." "That's truancy, Maya. Social services might have questions about a mother dragging her daughter to an isolated mountain cabin with no plan for education or stability." The threat was barely veiled. Maya felt her hands clench into fists, forcing herself to breathe slowly and stay calm. "Lily is enrolled in Truckee Elementary. Starts Monday. I have all the documentation if you'd like to file a false report and face charges for harassment." That was a bluff. Maya had submitted the enrollment paperwork yesterday, but hadn't received confirmation yet. Still, David's confidence faltered slightly, suggesting he hadn't expected her to be that prepared. "I'm not trying to harass you," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I'm trying to help family." Margaret was a stubborn woman who let this property become a burden. "You're young. You have options. Take the 100,000, start fresh somewhere with better opportunities. That's more than this cabin is worth, and you know it. If it's only worth what you're offering, why are you so desperate to buy it?" David's mask slipped completely, revealing the calculation beneath. "Because it's family land. It should stay in the family, not go to some outsider when you inevitably can't keep up with the taxes and maintenance." "I'm not an outsider. Margaret left it to me specifically. That makes it mine, not family property." Margaret was dying and sentimental. She didn't understand what she was doing. 3 independent physicians confirmed she was mentally competent. Brennan has all the documentation. Try to challenge the will, and you'll lose, David. You'll just waste money on lawyers and end up with nothing. David's expression hardened, the charm evaporating completely. "You have no idea what you're getting into. This mountain has dangers you can't imagine. Winter's coming, Maya. Storms that will bury this cabin in snow, cut you off from help for weeks at a time. Is that really what you want for Lily? Struggling in isolation while you chase some fantasy about making this work. What I want is for you to leave my property. Now, you're making a mistake. When you realize that, when you're desperate and scared and ready to sell, I might not be offering 100,000 anymore. I might not be offering anything. Then I'll keep the property and you'll get nothing, which is exactly what you deserve." Maya stepped back and began closing the door. "Don't come here again. Next time I call the sheriff, it won't be for a report. It'll be for an arrest." She shut the door on David's furious expression, her hands shaking as she threw the deadbolt. Through the window, she watched him storm to his SUV, pausing to photograph the cabin from multiple angles before driving away with enough speed to send gravel flying. Lily emerged from the bedroom, where Maya had told her to stay during the confrontation. "Was that the mean man from your family?" "That was Uncle David. He wanted to buy our cabin." "Are we selling?" "No, baby. We're not selling. This is our home now." Lily processed this with the seriousness of a child who'd learned to read adult tensions. "He seemed really mad that you said no. Some people get mad when they don't get what they want, but that doesn't mean we have to give it to them." That night, Maya called Brennan to report the encounter. His response was immediate and decisive. "We're filing for a restraining order tomorrow." David's threats about social services and winter dangers establish a pattern of harassment. "We have grounds." "Will that make things worse?" "Probably, but it also creates legal protection. If he violates the restraining order, he faces criminal charges that might make him think twice before escalating further. Papers rustled on Brennan's end. I've also heard back from 2 of the mining companies. Both are interested in preliminary assessments. I've scheduled site visits for next week, presented as routine mineral surveys. Nothing that would alert David to the mine's value. What I need to do: be present for the meetings, show them Margaret's documentation, let them verify the geological surveys. These are professionals, Maya. They'll know within a few hours whether the mine is worth developing. If they confirm Margaret's estimates, we can start negotiating lease terms. The mining company representatives arrived separately over 3 days, each conducting their assessments with professional discretion. The first was a woman named Dr. Sarah Martinez from Sierra Gold Development, who spent 6 hours examining Margaret's surveys, taking new core samples, and exploring the accessible mine shafts with equipment that looked like something from a science fiction movie. "Your aunt was thorough," Martinez said, reviewing the data on her laptop while sitting at Maya's kitchen table. "These surveys are professional grade, better than some operations I've assessed with 10 times the budget. If her estimates are accurate, and my preliminary readings suggest they are, you're sitting on one of the richest undeveloped gold deposits in the Sierra Nevada." What does that mean in practical terms? Martinez pulled up spreadsheets that made Maya's eyes glaze over, numbers and projections, and technical terminology she barely understood. In practical terms, it means Sierra Gold would be very interested in leasing the mineral rights. We'd handle all development costs, approximately $45 to $50 million for full infrastructure and extraction setup. In exchange, we'd propose a lease giving you 15% of net profits after extraction costs. Brennan mentioned 12 to 20% is standard. It is. I'm offering on the lower end because of the development costs and risks involved. But I can tell you that at 15%, based on preliminary estimates, you'd be looking at approximately $28 to $35 million over the mine's projected 15-year operational life. Roughly $2 to $2.5 million annually once we're at full production. $2 to $2.5 million per year. Maya had to ask Martinez to repeat the numbers twice before they sank in. That was more than she'd earn in nursing over her entire career. That was generational wealth, the kind of money that would transform not just her life, but Lily's future. What's the timeline? Environmental permits take 18 to 24 months. Infrastructure construction, another 18 months. Full production would begin approximately 3 to 4 years from lease signing. We'd pay a modest signing bonus, maybe $150,000, to secure the rights while permits are in progress. After that, quarterly royalty payments based on extraction volumes. The second company, Mountain Ridge Mining, sent a team of 3 geologists who spent 2 full days assessing the site. Their offer was more aggressive: 18% of net profits in exchange for accelerated development that would begin production in 30 months instead of 3 to 4 years. The signing bonus would be $200,000, with guaranteed minimum royalty payments of $500,000 annually even if extraction fell short of projections. "We believe in putting our money where our mouth is," the lead geologist explained. "If we're wrong about the mine's value, we eat the loss. If we're right, and we believe we are, that minimum payment is a bargain compared to what you'll actually receive." The third assessment came from a smaller operation, family-owned and operated, called Caldwell Mining. The irony of the name wasn't lost on Maya. Harrison Caldwell had been the original mine owner, the man who'd sold the property to Robert in 1952. The company representative was Harrison's great-grandson, James Caldwell, who approached the assessment with obvious emotional investment. "My great-grandfather always believed this mine had more to give," James explained, examining Robert's surveys with reverence. "He died thinking he'd failed because the war forced closure before he could reach the deeper veins. If your aunt's surveys are accurate, he was right. The gold was there all along." Caldwell Mining's offer was the smallest financially: 12% of net profits, $100,000 signing bonus, projected timeline of 4 to 5 years to full production. But James's presentation included something the others hadn't: a commitment to employ local workers, minimize environmental impact, and establish a community fund that would direct 2% of gross profits to Truckee area schools and infrastructure. We're not the biggest operation, James admitted. We can't promise the fastest timeline or the highest percentages. But we're invested in this mountain beyond just extracting gold. My family built their legacy here. I'd like to honor that while helping you build yours. Maya spent a week reviewing the offers with Brennan, analyzing projections and contract terms, trying to make a decision that would affect the rest of her life. The money was almost secondary to the question of who she'd be partnering with, who would have access to her property for the next 15 to 20 years. Financially, Mountain Ridge is the strongest offer, Brennan advised. The guaranteed minimum protects you if extraction runs into problems. Sierra Gold is solid, but conservative. Caldwell Mining is the emotional choice, which doesn't make it wrong. But you need to be clear about why you're choosing them. Maya thought about James Caldwell's presentation, about his great-grandfather who died thinking he'd failed, about the commitment to community benefit beyond just profit extraction. She thought about Margaret's letters to Robert, about honoring legacies and building something meaningful. I want to go with Caldwell Mining, she decided. Can we negotiate the percentage up to 15% to match Sierra Gold? I can try. The signing bonus might come down if we push the percentage up. Are you comfortable with that? Yes. The signing bonus is short-term. The percentage is long-term. And James's commitment to the community matters to me. Brennan negotiated for 3 days, finally securing an agreement. 15% of net profits, $75,000 signing bonus, guaranteed minimum annual payment of $400,000 starting in year 3, and the community fund commitment. Maya signed the preliminary agreement on a Tuesday afternoon, her hands shaking as she put pen to paper. The $75,000 arrived in her bank account 2 weeks later. Maya stared at the balance on her phone, at numbers that represented more money than she'd ever had at one time, and had to sit down before her knees gave out. We're really okay now, she whispered to Lily that evening. We can fix the cabin, buy proper winter clothes, get you everything you need for school. We're going to be okay. But David wasn't done. The restraining order had been granted, prohibiting him from coming within 500 feet of the property or contacting Maya directly. That didn't stop him from finding other ways to apply pressure. The county tax assessor suddenly requested a reevaluation of the property, suggesting that recent improvements and development might warrant increased taxation. The letter was carefully worded, technically legitimate, but the timing was suspicious. Brennan filed an objection, arguing that no significant improvements have been made and that standard assessment schedules should apply. The local propane company that serviced the cabin's heating called to inform Maya that her account had been flagged for immediate payment of outstanding balances. When Maya pointed out that Margaret had prepaid through the end of the year, they apologized for the computer error but couldn't explain how it had occurred. Most concerning was the building inspector who appeared unannounced, claiming he'd received an anonymous complaint about unpermitted construction and unsafe living conditions. He spent 3 hours examining every inch of the cabin, photographing everything, taking notes about the age of the electrical system and the condition of the well. Everything looks acceptable, he finally admitted, but I'm required to follow up on all complaints. You'll receive a formal report within 2 weeks. If there are any code violations, you'll need to address them within 90 days. Maya called Brennan immediately after the inspector left. This is David, isn't it? He can't contact me directly, so he's using every official channel he can think of. Almost certainly. But here's the thing. Every false or exaggerated complaint creates more evidence of harassment. Keep documentation of everything. Dates, times, names, what was claimed versus what was found. We're building a case. A case for what? Depending on how far he pushes this, possibly a civil suit for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. These aren't just annoying bureaucratic hassles, Maya. They're part of a pattern of behavior designed to make your life so difficult that you give up and sell. The harassment continued through October. Anonymous complaints about Lily's school attendance, despite perfect records. A visit from social services investigating reports of inadequate housing, which were dismissed immediately when the caseworker saw the cabin's condition. Letters from a law firm Maya had never heard of, claiming to represent concerned family members who were exploring options to challenge the will on grounds they never quite specified. Through it all, Maya focused on building their life. Lily thrived at Truckee Elementary, making friends and discovering a passion for science that reminded Maya painfully of Michael's enthusiasm for archaeology. The cabin became a real home as Maya made repairs using the signing bonus, replacing the roof with help from a local contractor, upgrading the electrical system to handle modern appliances, installing a modern well pump that provided reliable water pressure. She found work at a clinic in Truckee, part-time nursing that let her maintain her license while being available for Lily's school schedule. The pay was modest, but combined with the signing bonus and the promise of future royalty payments, it was enough to live comfortably. Winter arrived with the ferocity David had warned about, snow falling in amounts Maya had never experienced. The cabin was buried to its windows by January, accessible only by the snowmobile Maya had purchased in November at the hardware store owner's strong recommendation. Lily thought it was magical, building snow forts and learning to ski on the gentle slopes near the cabin. "Mama, can we stay here forever?" Lily asked one evening as they sat by the fireplace, hot chocolate warming their hands. "As long as you want, baby. This is our home. I like it better than Sacramento, even when it's cold." Maya pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and chocolate and childhood contentment. They'd made it through the hard part, the transition, the initial threats, the uncertainty about whether they could survive in such an isolated place. Now they were thriving. The call from Brennan in March brought both validation and new concerns. The building inspector's report came back. No violations found, which we expected, but the report includes a note that concerns me. The inspector noted evidence of extensive underground construction inconsistent with property records. He's recommending a geotechnical survey to ensure structural stability. Maya's stomach dropped. The basement. Someone must have told the inspector to look for it. What does that mean? It means David or his people have figured out there's more to the cabin than what's visible. They don't know about the mine specifically, but they know something exists beneath the structure. The geotechnical survey would reveal the basement and potentially raise questions about what's stored there. Can they force a survey? Not easily, but they can make bureaucratic noise that's expensive and time-consuming to fight. More importantly, it tells us David is getting close to the truth. We need to accelerate the mining development timeline if possible. The spring brought both progress and escalation. Caldwell Mining's environmental permits advanced faster than expected, with preliminary approval granted in April. James Caldwell attributed this to the mine's history. Reopening an existing operation was simpler than starting from scratch. Construction crews began arriving in May, building access roads and infrastructure for the eventual mining operations. David's response was immediate and aggressive. He filed a lawsuit claiming that Margaret's will violated family trust provisions that Maya had never heard of. Brennan called the claim baseless, a desperation move designed to delay mining development, but it still required legal response and tied up resources. Then came the anonymous tip to environmental groups, claiming that Caldwell Mining was planning to use dangerous chemicals that would contaminate local water supplies. The claim was false, easily disproven by the approved environmental plans, but it generated negative publicity and protests that slowed permit finalizations. Most dramatically, someone vandalized the mining equipment being stored near the primary shaft entrance. Thousands of dollars in damage, done overnight by someone who knew exactly which components were most critical and expensive to replace. The sheriff investigated, but the remote location and lack of witnesses made prosecution unlikely. "This is getting out of hand," Maya told Brennan after the vandalism. "How far is David willing to go?" "As far as he needs to. He spent 30 years trying to get this property. He's not going to stop just because we have legal protection." Brennan paused, his voice careful when he continued. "There's something else. I've been contacted by an attorney representing the Chen family trust. They're claiming that Robert's purchase of the property in 1952 was invalid because Harrison Caldwell didn't have clear title to sell. That was 70 years ago, which is why the claim won't succeed. The statute of limitations has long since expired, and Margaret held the property for decades without challenge. But it tells us they're getting desperate, throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. The preliminary mining operations began in June, despite David's continued legal challenges. Caldwell Mining started with careful excavation of the accessible shafts, confirming Margaret's surveys with modern equipment and techniques. The results exceeded even optimistic projections. The main vein is richer than your aunt estimated, James Caldwell told Maya during a site visit, his excitement barely contained. We're seeing concentrations of 3.2 ounces per ton in the accessible seams. If that extends to the deeper formations, we're looking at gross values approaching $400 million. $400 million. The number had become almost meaningless to Maya, too large to process in terms of her actual life. What mattered more was the quarterly payment Caldwell Mining made in July, the first royalty distribution based on preliminary extraction, $127,000. $127,000 for 3 months of limited operations while they were still setting up infrastructure. Maya stared at the deposit notification, her mind doing math about what annual payments might look like once full production began. She used part of the money to establish a college fund for Lily, investing conservatively in accounts that would grow over the next decade. Another portion went to the Truckee School District, an anonymous donation that funded new science equipment and field trip programs. The rest went into savings, building a cushion against whatever David might try next. What he tried next was direct confrontation. In August, he arrived at the cabin with 3 men Maya didn't recognize, positioning themselves at the property line but making no attempt to hide their presence. They stayed for 6 hours, photographing everything, documenting the mining operations, clearly trying to intimidate through their presence alone. Maya called the sheriff, who dispatched a deputy to enforce the restraining order. David and his companions left without incident, but the message was clear: legal protection only extended so far. "We need to consider your safety more seriously," Brennan said when Maya reported the incident. "David is escalating because the mining operations prove the property's value. He's running out of legal options, which means he might try extra-legal ones. You think he'd physically hurt us? I think he's desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. At minimum, we should upgrade your security. Cameras, alarm systems, maybe periodic checks from private security during high-risk periods." Maya agreed, though the idea of needing security guards made her stomach churn. She'd come to the mountains to escape threats and build a safe life for Lily. Now, she was installing cameras and panic buttons, teaching her daughter emergency protocols in case bad people came to hurt them. The turning point came in September, almost exactly a year after Maya and Lily had first arrived at the cabin. David filed criminal charges against Maya, claiming she had stolen documents from Margaret's estate that belonged to the family trust. The charges were specific: geological surveys, mineral assessments, and historical records that David claimed were family property, not Margaret's personal effects. "This is absurd," Brennan fumed when he called to inform Maya. "Those documents were in Margaret's possession, in her private archive. They're yours by inheritance, not theft. But he knows about the basement now. He knows about the surveys. He knows something exists, but he's made a critical mistake. By filing criminal charges, he's put the burden of proof on the prosecutor. The DA will examine the evidence and realize there's no case. When those charges are dismissed, it becomes more evidence of David's harassment campaign." The charges were indeed dismissed within 2 weeks, with the district attorney issuing a stern letter to David's attorney about filing false reports. But the damage was done in a different way. David now had confirmation that valuable documentation existed, even if he couldn't access it. His response was to file a civil suit demanding complete inventory of Margaret's estate, including all documents, surveys, and assessments related to the property. The suit claimed that as Margaret's closest living relative, David had rights to review estate assets to ensure proper distribution according to family trust provisions. "We're going to trial," Brennan said flatly. David's forcing a full legal battle over the estate's contents. "It's going to be expensive, time-consuming, and very public. The mining operations will become part of the public record. Everyone will know what you inherited. Can we win?" "Yes." The will is ironclad. The property transfer is legal, and David has no legitimate claim to estate contents. But winning could take months, and during that time, you'll be under intense scrutiny. The trial was scheduled for November. Maya spent October preparing, reviewing documents with Brennan, providing depositions, and trying to maintain normal life for Lily while legal proceedings consumed her energy. The courtroom was smaller than Maya expected, a county courthouse in Truckee that smelled like old wood and nervous lawyers. David sat at the plaintiff's table with his legal team, 3 attorneys who projected confidence and expensive suits. Maya sat with Brennan, feeling outmatched until she looked at the evidence binders stacked beside her lawyer. Margaret had documented everything. 70 years of property ownership, clear title chains, independent medical evaluations, witness statement from neighbors confirming Margaret's mental competence. Every possible challenge David could raise, Margaret had anticipated and refuted with meticulous documentation. The trial lasted 3 days. David's attorneys argued that Margaret had been unduly influenced, that she didn't understand the property's value when she wrote her will, that family trust provisions superseded individual bequests. They presented expert testimony from a geologist who claimed the mineral surveys were exaggerated, that the mine couldn't possibly contain the gold Margaret had estimated. Brennan systematically destroyed each argument. He presented Margaret's medical evaluations, her personal letters documenting decades of deliberate planning, her relationship with Maya that predated any inheritance discussions. He called James Caldwell to testify about current mining operations and confirmed gold discoveries that validated Margaret's estimates. Most devastatingly, Brennan presented evidence of David's 30-year campaign to acquire the property, including documentation of previous fraudulent offers and attempts to manipulate Margaret into selling. The pattern of behavior painted David not as a concerned family member, but as a greedy relative who'd ignored Margaret while she was alive and now wanted to profit from her death. The judge's ruling was decisive. The evidence overwhelmingly supports that Margaret Chen was of sound mind when she executed her will, that she intended to leave her entire estate to Maya Chen, and that no family trust provisions apply to property Margaret owned individually. The plaintiff's claim is denied in its entirety. Furthermore, given the pattern of harassment documented by the defendant, I'm ordering the plaintiff to pay the defendant's legal fees and issuing a permanent injunction against further legal challenges to the estate distribution. David's face went purple with rage as the ruling was read. He stood, shouting something about judicial bias and family betrayal before his attorneys pulled him back down. Maya sat frozen, barely processing that they'd won, that it was finally over. "It's not over," Brennan warned as they left the courthouse. "The ruling protects the inheritance, but David can still appeal. And men like him don't accept defeat gracefully." But the appeal never came. Instead, Maya received a letter 2 weeks later, delivered by certified mail. Inside was a handwritten note from David's wife, Patricia, whom Maya had met only once at a family gathering years ago. "Maya, I'm writing without David's knowledge. What he's done to you is unconscionable, and I can't be part of it anymore. He's been obsessed with Margaret's property since I've known him, convinced she was hiding something valuable. The trial confirmed his suspicions, and now he's planning something I can't support. I don't know specifics, but I've heard him talking about making the property unusable if he can't have it. Please be careful. I'm filing for divorce next week. I wanted you to know you're not imagining the danger. Patricia." Maya showed the letter to Brennan, who immediately contacted the sheriff. Deputies increased patrols around the property and Caldwell mining station security guards at the mining operations around the clock. Maya added more cameras, more locks, more safety protocols. The attack came on a Tuesday in December, almost 15 months after Maya had first arrived at the cabin. She was at work in Truckee. Lily was at school when the security company called. Fire at the property, origin unknown, spreading rapidly through dry winter forest. Maya's hand shook so badly she could barely drive. The 20-minute trip to the cabin felt like hours. Every second convinced she was about to lose everything Margaret had left her, everything she'd fought to keep. But when she arrived, fire trucks were already there, crews working to contain a blaze that had started near the mining equipment storage but hadn't reached the cabin or the main mine entrances. The fire chief met her with grim news. Definitely arson. Accelerant pattern is obvious, and we found evidence of a timing device. Someone wanted this to look accidental, but they weren't very good at it. The sheriff's investigation led directly to David. Security footage from the mining site showed his vehicle on the access road the night before. The timing device fragments contained fingerprints from Jack Morrison, David's employee who'd broken into the cabin over a year ago. Cell phone records placed both men in the area when the fire was set. David was arrested within 48 hours, charged with arson, conspiracy to commit arson, and violation of the restraining order. Jack Morrison was arrested simultaneously. Both posted bail immediately, but the criminal charges ensured they'd be tied up in legal proceedings for months, potentially facing prison time if convicted. "This is it," Brennan told Maya. "David's finally crossed the line from civil harassment to criminal action. He's done, Maya. He can't hurt you anymore." The trial for the arson charges happened in March, nearly 2 years after Maya had first arrived at the cabin. The evidence was overwhelming: security footage, fingerprints, cell phone records, testimony from Patricia Chen, who confirmed her ex-husband's obsession with the property and his statements about making it unusable. David was convicted on all charges, sentenced to 4 years in prison with possibility of parole after 2. Jack Morrison received 3 years for his participation. The judge's statement at sentencing was scathing. This defendant's actions represent not just criminal behavior, but a fundamental misunderstanding of what family means. Rather than celebrating a relative success, rather than supporting a struggling single mother trying to build a life for her daughter, the defendant engaged in a years-long campaign of harassment, intimidation, and ultimately violence. This court hopes that prison time will provide opportunity for reflection on those choices. Maya watched from the courtroom gallery as David was led away in handcuffs, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only relief that the threat was finally neutralized. The years that followed were everything Margaret had hoped for when she left Maya the property. Caldwell Mining's operations expanded, with full production beginning in the fall after David's conviction. The quarterly royalty payments grew steadily, $340,000, then $580,000, then $920,000 as they accessed the deeper, richer veins. Maya's annual income from a mine stabilized around $2.8 million, more money than she could have imagined 5 years ago when she'd been facing eviction in Sacramento. She continued working part-time at the clinic because she loved nursing, but her real focus became managing the wealth responsibly and building the future Margaret had envisioned. The cabin was expanded carefully, preserving its rustic character while adding modern amenities and a proper bedroom for Lily. The basement archive was professionally preserved, its contents cataloged and protected for future generations. Margaret and Robert's photographs were framed and displayed throughout the house, honoring the people who'd made everything possible. Lily grew into a confident teenager who loved the mountains, who excelled in science, and talked about becoming a geologist like Robert had been. She knew the whole story now: Margaret's careful planning, David's harassment, the legal battles that had secured their future. She understood that wealth came with responsibility, that their good fortune was built on decades of other people's work and sacrifice. "I want to do something meaningful with this," Lily told Maya one evening when she was 15, looking at college brochures for geology programs. "Not just spend the money, but use it to help people like Margaret helped us." Maya pulled her daughter close, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I think Margaret would love that." They established the Margaret and Robert Chen Foundation, funded by a portion of the mining royalties, dedicated to helping single mothers facing financial hardship. The foundation provided emergency housing assistance, job training, childcare support, and education funding. In its first 3 years, it helped over 200 families avoid eviction and build stable lives. The community fund James Caldwell had committed to transformed Truckee schools, funding science programs and field trips that benefited hundreds of children. Maya served on the school board, using her experience to advocate for resources that would have helped her when she was struggling. 5 years after the trial, Maya stood on the cabin's porch watching the sunset paint the Sierra Nevada gold and crimson. Lily was inside doing homework, music playing from speakers that had replaced Margaret's old radio. The mine operations hummed in the distance, extracting wealth from a mountain that had waited decades to be discovered. Her phone rang with an unknown number. Maya almost didn't answer, old habits from the harassment years still influencing her reflexes. But something made her accept the call. "Ms. Chun, this is Catherine Morrison, Margaret's estate attorney. I hope you don't mind me calling out of the blue." "Not at all. What can I do for you?" "I'm actually calling to share something I should have told you years ago. Margaret left me a letter to be delivered 5 years after her death. I received it this week." Catherine's voice wavered slightly. "She wanted me to tell you that she knew exactly how hard the fight would be. She knew David would challenge everything, knew you'd face threats and harassment and moments when you want to give up. But she believed you were strong enough to survive it all." Maya's throat tightened. "Did she say anything else?" "Just one more thing." She wrote, "Tell Maya that inheriting property isn't the same as inheriting worth. The cabin and the mine were always just tools to help her see what I saw in her. The strength to fight for herself and her daughter, the courage to stand against people who try to diminish her, and the grace to use good fortune to help others. The real inheritance was believing she deserved better than what life had given her. Everything else was just gold." After Catherine hung up, Maya stood in the fading light, tears streaming down her face. Margaret had been right about everything: the mine's value, David's obsession, the legal battles Maya would face. But more importantly, she'd been right about Maya herself. The woman who'd arrived at this cabin 5 years ago, evicted and desperate, and convinced she deserved nothing better than struggle, was gone. In her place stood someone who'd fought for her inheritance and won, who'd protected her daughter and built a future, who'd taken Margaret's gift and transformed it into something that helped others escape the poverty Maya had known too well. Lily appeared in the doorway, backlit by the cabin's warm interior light. "Mama, dinner's ready. You okay?" Maya wiped her eyes and smiled. "Yeah, baby. I'm perfect. You're crying, though." Happy tears. "Just thinking about Aunt Margaret and how grateful I am for everything she left us." "Me too." Lily paused, then added with the earnestness of a teenager processing complex thoughts. "Do you think she knew? Like, knew we'd make it through all the bad stuff and end up here?" Maya looked around at the property they'd fought so hard to keep, at the mine that had transformed their lives, at the daughter who would inherit not just wealth, but the values that made wealth meaningful. "Yeah, sweetheart. I think she knew exactly how it would turn out. She believed in us before we believed in ourselves." They went inside together, the cabin's warmth enveloping them, the smell of dinner mixing with smoke and pine. Outside, the Sierra Nevada mountains stood eternal, holding secrets and gold, and the legacy of 2 people who'd built something extraordinary and passed it forward to someone they barely knew but trusted completely. The inheritance wasn't just $227 million in gold. It was the knowledge that Maya had deserved better, that she'd been strong enough to fight for it, and that she'd use it to help others find their own worth. Margaret and Robert's cabin had become more than a home. It had become proof that kindness and courage could transform desperation into abundance, struggle into triumph, and inheritance into legacy. And on quiet evenings when Maya sat on the porch watching stars emerge over the mountains, she could almost hear Margaret's voice on the wind, proud and satisfied, whispering the words that had carried Maya through the hardest battles. "Trust yourself. You're stronger than you know." Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, Check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.